is going on, everybody? My name is Villapiano, and I'm back at it again with another episode here on the Mofobo Network YouTube channel. Again, thank you so much for joining me. We have a lot to get to today. We are talking about NFL free agency. There were a handful of moves the past couple of weeks, whether it was signings or trades, that I just felt like that we had to get into. We had to talk about. So I apologize if I'm a little late to the party, so to speak, with regards to giving you guys this information. But you know what? Better late than never, as I always say. So we have a bunch to get through. So let's just jump right into it with our first move of the day, or move of free agency that was really significant in my opinion. And it was a trade. Now, on the first day when the NFL free agency officially began, when the NFL said that it was a new season, so to speak, there were rumors and rumblings going around that DeAndre Hopkins was going to be in trade talks. And I sat there and I said, why? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I just thought that, DeAndre Hopkins, being the great player that he is, one of the best, if not possibly the best wide receiver in the National Football League right now, why would he be traded? Now, he does have one more year left on his current deal, and then after this year, he will be a free agent, so to speak, but I'm sure that he will be working out a new deal with his new team. Kind of spoiler alert there, but his new team within the next year or so. But that remains to be seen. But I know that he had been wanting to get more money. I'd heard about that. I had heard the reports that he was asking for money. And the Texans, unfortunately, don't have very much draft capital. So they were in a very tough situation where not only could they not afford possibly DeAndre Hopkins' contract even for this year, but they didn't even have draft picks to necessarily go out and get players that maybe they could replace. So, unfortunately, this is what happens when you trade away a lot of your assets, your draft picks, for players that maybe don't work out. And you look at the Texans, up 24-0 against the Chiefs in the AFC divisional game. Losing that game after being up 24-0 was a fireable offense right off the bat for Bill O'Brien. He really should have been fired after the game. There's no excuse to that. But not only does he remain as head coach, he gets also hired as the GM. So he gets to be a two-headed monster where he gets to determine player personnel and also coach the guys that he brings in. And so what is the first move that he makes? Well, it came a couple hours after we had already seen several free agent signings and basically just moves that we kind of expected. And it really started with, it was announced that David Johnson, the running back for the Arizona Cardinals, who hasn't averaged more than 4 yards a carry in the past 2 years because of injuries, was traded to the Texans. Now, the Texans already have enough running backs. Unless they're trying to do a running back by committee, this kind of doesn't make any sense. But David Johnson goes to the Texans, so I didn't think much of it. I was like, oh, okay, whatever, just another move on. But then less than 5 minutes later, I get a notification saying DeAndre Hopkins has been traded to Arizona in the move for David Johnson. And my head was spinning. I said, what? The Cardinals? First of all, very shocked. Did not hear about the Cardinals being even one of the teams in talks or even interested in DeAndre Hopkins. But I'm sure with a player like DeAndre Hopkins, everybody has some interest to an extent. But the Cardinals go out and they decide to go and get DeAndre Hopkins. And I said to myself, is this a 1-for-1? Did the Cardinals give up a huge amount of assets for DeAndre Hopkins? Well, this is the official trade details. The Cardinals get DeAndre Hopkins and a 2020 4th-round pick, so they get a 4th-round pick for this upcoming draft. And the Texans get David Johnson, a 2020 2nd-round pick, and a 2020 4th-round pick. That's it. No 1st-round pick. No, not even like multiple 1st-round picks. Just no 1st-round picks at all. No other players other than David Johnson. So, in a way, the trade really is the Cardinals get DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson and a 2020 2nd-round pick. I like to disregard the 4th-round pick, even though I know that there are great players that have come from the later rounds of the draft, but that's just the way I'm going at it. I could not believe that Bill O'Brien made this move. It just made no sense. I didn't get it at first. It blew my mind. And then I heard the rumblings several hours after the trade had been announced and it was official that DeAndre Hopkins wanted a lot more money and that Bill O'Brien apparently compared him to Aaron Hernandez, which then DeAndre Hopkins confirmed on Twitter or social media that it was not true and that he had no disagreements with Bill O'Brien or the Texans. And yeah, that was pretty much it. So that's what it was. And DeAndre Hopkins had a contract extension that was 3 years, $39 million in 2018. Actually, excuse me, that wasn't DeAndre Hopkins. That was David Johnson. David Johnson signed a 3-year contract extension in 2018 with the Cardinals. And in 2020, he'll be making $11 million. In 2021, he'll make about $9 million, and then he'll be a free agent in 2022. Let me repeat what I said before. David Johnson has not rushed for over 5 yards a carry in almost 2.5 years. He has been injury prone and has struggled to gain the production that he once had. He was very good a couple of years ago. A lot of people, especially in fantasy football, really loved David Johnson because of his productivity with what he had in Arizona. But again, injuries were killing him. And as a result, the Cardinals realized that they are paying way too much money for a running back, and they wanted to find a way to get him off the books. And the fact that Bill O'Brien was willing enough to take on that contract and get very little back in addition to that, and having to give up your best player and one of the best players in the NFL, is another, if not increasing 2 times, fireable offense. So now, Bill O'Brien has 2 strikes in the past 6 months. The collapse of the AFC divisional game against the Kansas City Chiefs when you were up 24-0, and then you trading away DeAndre Hopkins. And if I'm Deshaun Watson, the first question you obviously will ask is, where the heck is this team going? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to say to our fans? Are we a team that's trying to rebound and try to make it further next year? Or are we now in a rebuild mode because we just have very little money to go around, not very much draft picks to go around, and this is what we have to do? When you have somebody like Bill O'Brien who doesn't have experience and wisdom with regards to making player personnel decisions like that and financial situations like that, this is the type of results you get. When you start making trades with multiple draft picks to the point where you don't even have draft picks to go by when you go into the draft, and you have an opportunity to get younger players who are worth a little bit less, at least on their rookie deal, than somebody who's a 5-year veteran. Now, look, there are other options out there for the Texans to get pieces. You do have players who are in the XFL that are probably going to go for not a terrible amount of money. I mean, we've already seen, 10 plus players in the XFL get picked up over the last couple of days, and especially over the last week. So there's an option there. There's also, just hoping that with the picks that you have, the players that you get in those later rounds are guys that can benefit. Now, this is a very big and very deep wide receiver class for the draft. So the Texans probably are going to be looking to add a wide receiver or 2. But getting a 2nd and a 4th is not really guaranteeing you that you're going to get a tremendously talented wide receiver. A lot of those bigger time guys are probably going to be gone by the time you have an opportunity to draft one. So unless you have an idea as to the type of guys that you expect that will be there when you draft them, and that you draft are going to be good pieces for Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's best receiver now is Kyle Fuller. Fuller, who I really loved out of Notre Dame. I loved watching him in college. I thought he was going to be a much bigger time receiver. And, honestly, he has shown signs of that. But also, he has struggled to stay on the field. And the Texans are hoping for. Also, the Texans signed Randall Cobb, a slot receiver, when they already have one in Fuller, to a massive deal. I think it was something like $40+ million. I think it was like $60 million. If I don't have it on me exactly, but $60 million. So you replace DeAndre Hopkins with with basically Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb has not been the same receiver, especially since he left Green Bay. Is that because of Aaron Rodgers? That remains to be seen. But at the same freaking time, you traded away your best player for pennies on the dollar. I mean, that's basically what it is. And I understand that you had to make moves like that, but you could have at least gotten a better deal. I'm sure there were better deals out there. I heard that the Philadelphia Eagles were very interested in getting DeAndre Hopkins. Who knows? Maybe they had a better deal. Maybe they were willing to give up that first round pick. But it just seemed like that the Texans and Bill O'Brien was just wanting to make a deal just to make a deal. That's really the way I saw this trade. So the Cardinals get a number one wide receiver to add to Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, and you add it to the young franchise quarterback in Kyler Murray. With the offense that has started to develop more and more and is starting to look like it could be a real deal, you are just giving the Cardinals a much better nucleus of players and get a credible talent like DeAndre Hopkins. And now the expectations are risen much more because now that offense is going to be super lethal. And here's the other thing. DeAndre Hopkins, in many cases, is going to be double-teamed once he starts playing with the Cardinals. That means Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald are going to be left one-on-one. And, especially with Larry Fitzgerald, even though he is up there in age and this is probably going to be his last year in the NFL coming up, he's still very dangerous one-on-one, and he's going to be able to make a lot of plays, and that's going to give Kyler Murray just another opportunity to pick apart defenses. Now, when it comes to the running back position, it looks like it's going to be Kenyon Drake for the future. I'm thinking Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. That might not be a bad idea to try to go get him maybe in the early second round, maybe mid-second round, depending on your situation. I mean, they did trade their second-round pick, the Cardinals did, to the Texans. So, they could always move up. They still have a decent amount of draft picks, so they can always move up. There's always moves that happen and that can be made in these deals. But look, the bottom line is this. You don't trade away a player like that when the player, and no disrespect to DeAndre Hopkins, doesn't have the control in this situation. It's not like DeAndre Hopkins said, I wanted to be traded away from Houston. I don't want to be here anymore. Bill O'Brien chose, instead of hoping that maybe they could work out a deal after this upcoming season, to just move on from DeAndre Hopkins now and try to get assets for him now. Now, if DeAndre Hopkins was having a bad year and he gets traded in the middle of the year, this year, and if he was still with Houston, I could see why you don't get very much for him necessarily. But this is a guy who is in the top 3 in wide receivers in the NFL. This is one of those guys that literally catches anything you put in his general area. He's just that talented. And the fact that you traded him away for pennies on the dollar and a running back who is going to be making $20 million over the next 2 years, and a guy, and also who has not been able to average over 5 yards a carry in the past 2.5 years, is an absolutely ridiculous move by the Houston Texans. Bill O'Brien has almost single-handedly become the worst general manager in the National Football League off of one move. Every other GM has looked at this move and said, how in the actual heck did the Cardinals get away without having to give up their first-round pick? It is absolutely incredible. And guess what? Since the Cardinals still had that first-round pick, they could go out and try to get one of the top wide receivers in the later stages in the middle of the first round. Or they could probably get a sweet deal to maybe add another player or other draft picks to go from there. So, when you look at it, Cliff Kingsbury and their offense is going to be 5 times better with DeAndre Hopkins. And with their defense, slowly but surely improving, and they added some pieces on defense, this is a team that can definitely compete in the NFC West and for certain can compete for a wild card spot. They're not there yet, But if they can get DeAndre Hopkins to have a big year and also maybe sign him to an extension or a new contract long-term with Arizona, the sky is going to be the limit, and it'll only be a matter of time before the Cardinals get back to being a playoff contender and eventually a Super Bowl contender. And as for the Texans, I don't know where to go from. I don't know where they're going to go from here, honestly. I really, really, really don't. I just don't see how this team is going to be any better than they were last year. They are most likely going to struggle because of not having a number one wide receiver, not having that threat. I think Deshaun Watson still is going to have a pretty good year, but he's definitely going to struggle with the situation that they have. So it remains to be seen how this is going to go. It'll be interesting to see what the Texans do in the draft. It's coming up in less than 3 weeks. I mean, it's April, 3rd? Yeah, today it's April 2nd. Jesus. With this quarantine, I'm forgetting what day it is. But, we're less than a couple weeks, we're a couple weeks away from the draft. So it'll be interesting to see, how the NFL draft is run, number one, and also what the Texans decide to do with the little bit of draft capital they were able to get for DeAndre Hopkins. So, yeah, this is going to be interesting, and we will see how this all plays out over not just the next couple of weeks, but certainly over the next couple of months. I think that's something to take into consideration. So let's move on from that and move on to the next move or signing that I was interested in. This was actually a trade and then eventually a contract extension move. The San Francisco 49ers traded their defensive tackle Deforest Buckner to the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for the 13th overall pick in this year's draft. So the Colts just added a tremendously talented defensive player to a defense that still has the makings to be one of the better ones going into 2020. And then right after that, after the trade, the Colts signed DeForest Buckner to an extension, 4 years, $84 million, and it starts in the 2021 season. So he'll play out the rest of his contract that he had with the 49ers, and then in 2021 will begin the beginning of the contract extension. And I think it's impressive that Chris Ballard, the GM of the Indianapolis Colts, was able to make this move without having to give up, more than just the 13th overall pick. This obviously shows that the Colts maybe were not intrigued on many prospects in the first round and saw the opportunity to get a player that could really, that not just could, but really will help their defense mightily. And so they made this move. And for the 49ers, this is a move that is able to clear up, $15+ million in cap space for this year. So a lot of people thought they made this move primarily because they wanted to try to re-sign Emmanuel Sanders after signing him, but he ended up signing with someone else, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But, if it's not Emmanuel Sanders, then it certainly will give the 49ers an opportunity to, make some, not necessarily make some trades, but, draft some wide receivers, as I mentioned before, very deep wide receiver draft class. And the Niners can find a guy that maybe could be a decent replacement for someone like Emmanuel Sanders. And remember, they still have Deebo Samuel. So they're still pretty good considering, that they didn't lose too much this offseason from the team that went to the Super Bowl just a couple months ago. So, less than about, actually, no, it's been it's actually exactly 2 months ago that we had the Super Bowl, which, again, it just feels like forever. With this whole quarantine and the whole COVID-19, it's times I just forget what day it is. So I apologize for that. But going back to this deal, I like it for both sides. It's a deal that works out. The Niners save a lot of money. They get another first-round pick. So they get a first-round pick because they traded their first to Denver in the Emmanuel Sanders deal. And, it's just a good deal. It's a deal that I really think will benefit both. I think the Colts, obviously also with signing Phillip Rivers to be their quarterback for this year. He signed a 1-year deal with Indianapolis a couple weeks ago. I think that's a team that definitely compete and have a good shot to win their division. And I certainly think that they're a playoff team. And, whether or not they have the pieces to make that next step to maybe taking a shot at the Super Bowl, it's kind of different. I mean, we know that most likely the New England Patriots will not be a contending team because of a certain player who decided to no longer be on the Patriots. And again, we'll get to more moves and that move in particular a little bit later. But, that, the Colts are right there. They have arguably the best offensive line in football. They have a defense that's clearly gotten better over the last 2 years and is looking to reach that next level. And adding Deforest Buckner certainly does that. So yeah, I think this is a good deal for Indianapolis, and it's a good deal for the Niners. So it's nice sometimes as just an analyst to see both teams benefit from it. Now obviously, if Deforest Buckner doesn't have good production or gets hurt or whatever, then obviously it changes. But right away and on paper, this looks like a solid move for both teams. So I'm interested to see what the 49ers do with that 13th overall pick, whether they keep it and draft somebody or they trade it. We'll see. I'm sure that John Lynch will look to try to make good use of that move regardless of whether they keep the pick or not. So now we're going to move on to another trade, and this was probably the biggest move. You can make the argument that it was the biggest move of the first day of free agency, and this came at about 8, 9 o'clock at night on the first day of free agency, and it was this. We're talking about the Steffon Diggs trade. Now, it's not a surprise that Steffon Diggs, for about the 85th time, made it clear that he was no longer happy with being in Minnesota and that he was looking to move on from the Vikings. So the Vikings finally were able to make a deal, and boy, did they make a deal. The Vikings get a 2020 first-round pick, which is 22nd overall, a 5th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick in 2020 as well, and a 2021 4th-round pick. They get all of that from the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills get Steffon Diggs and a 7th-round pick in this year's upcoming draft. And Steffon Diggs has 4 years left on his deal he signed, I think, 2 years ago or a year ago with the Vikings. So for Josh Allen, he finally gets a number 1 wide receiver in his 3rd year in the NFL. And this is a great move for both teams. Because again, we're going to have to go back to the DeAndre Hopkins move and analyze and compare it to the move that for Steffon Diggs that the Bills made. The Texans got a 2nd and a 4th. Didn't even get a 1st for DeAndre Hopkins, who, in my opinion, and I'm sure in the opinion of a lot of other people, is better than Steffon Diggs. Not disrespecting Steffon Diggs. He's a very talented wide receiver. He's going to make a lot of big plays for Josh Allen, be a great asset to him. But when you compare those two players, DeAndre Hopkins is a lot better. But the Vikings got a 1st, a 5th, a 6th, and a 4th in 2021. They get now 2 first-round picks. They have a chance to, even with the 22nd overall pick, to either move up or stay and still get a pretty decent wide receiver, a still relatively talented wide receiver, to fill somewhat of a void for Steffon Diggs. And for Diggs, he made it clear that he was very happy to be leaving Minnesota and going to Buffalo, because the Bills right now are the best team in the AFC East, and I don't think in my lifetime I've ever been able to say that. But going into 2020-21, the Bills are the best team in the AFC East. They are my favorites to go and win the division this year. This is a team that, if their defense was able to make a play at the end, would have beaten the Texans and gone to face Kansas City in the divisional round. And who knows what could have happened. But, Josh Allen, he has an opportunity now with a number 1 wide receiver to, become a little bit more of a pocket passing quarterback. I know he's been criticized the last couple of times that, about his scrambling and how he tries to make plays, go longer than maybe they should. But adding a guy like Steffon Diggs, who is good with either having, he's just good, especially getting separation. That's really Steffon Diggs' big thing. He has some speed that is just able to get past, most free safeties and most, secondary players in the NFL. So he's a guy that can become a dynamic weapon for Josh Allen. And then you have Brown as well, the other wide receiver that's going to take that next step, in his career after his impressive rookie season. And The Bills are on a rise. They had a very impressive season last year. I will definitely say that. They took a lot of people by surprise. I think those back-to-back wins against the Jets and Giants kind of helped them gain some confidence and really take off into last season. And now they get a big-time player like Steffon Diggs. And yeah, they did have to pay a pretty hefty price, but I really do think it's still beneficial. And for the Vikings, they just get a huge amount of draft capital to help build around Kirk Cousins, who they signed to a 2-year extension. And you still have Adam Thielen, who still is a tremendous wide receiver, one of the top, at least top 15, top 20 wide receivers in the NFL, no question about it. And then you could add a really good player, maybe even like Ruggs, hopefully if he falls, that far down in the first round, you could add him to that team, and he might not be the same player as Diggs, but he could still be very productive and help the Vikings offense continue to move forward as they try to, hopefully take another step towards getting back and getting to the Super Bowl in the near future. They finished last year getting blown out in a divisional game after winning a surprising overtime wild card game against the Saints when everyone thought, except myself, not to toot my own horn or anything, that they were going to win and surprise everybody. And it was a game and it was a win that Kirk Cousins really needed to have, because everybody was saying he hasn't won a playoff game, blah blah blah. When is he going to take that next step? I think he did, and I think that you get Steffon Diggs off of Minnesota. Now you don't have to worry about that. You can get some more players in here, some more talent, especially if you can add, a guy that can replace Everson Griffin, who clearly is not going back to Minnesota, but you could get a guy to maybe, replace him and hopefully have some amount of the same productivity. And then hopefully with that first round pick, you can get, a wide receiver or two that could fill those voids and really help Kirk Cousins moving forward. So I really like this deal for both teams. I think, it just shows that when you take the time to really not just focus on getting a deal done, but when you focus on the value and realizing the potential that a player could have, you get a better deal like that. So Bill O'Brien should really look at that deal and say, I really should have tried to get more instead of just getting what I got. Now we don't know again if the deal for DeAndre Hopkins was the only offer on the table. I'm pretty sure it wasn't, but still, they could have gotten a lot more. So I'm gonna, I just gotta say that it just bugs me that the Texans didn't get more, at least a first round pick. I would have been a little bit happier if they got a first round pick, but they didn't. And so that's how it goes. But job well done by the Vikings and job well done by the Bills. Bills get a number one wide receiver. Vikings get draft capital, another first round pick, and they could certainly use those as they try to, get their team to be a little bit better moving forward. So good move by both teams. And now, one of the deals, and not one, but I would certainly say that the biggest signing that we were all anticipating and looking towards was that Mr. Tom Brady. So when you look at Tom Brady, I said numerous times that I didn't expect him to go somewhere else. It just didn't really, it just didn't really seem possible to me because of who Tom Brady is and because of how the Patriots do things. I just felt like that all that anticipation was just going to lead to him signing a 2-3 year contract with the Patriots, and that would be it. But Tom Brady, I think a day or two after free agency started, he put out a picture on Instagram and I think also Twitter as well, basically thanking all of the Patriots fans, the organization, everything in between, and then said that he was moving on to the next phase of his career. That's when the alarm bells started to go off to say, oh my, Tom Brady really isn't going back to the Patriots. He's really going somewhere else. And then it became a question of, well, who is in the Tom Brady sweepstakes? And we had over the last couple of months, it was just throwing team after team out there. And it came down to about 3 teams not the Patriots, that were looking like that they were going to be, contestants in the Brady sweepstakes. You had the Las Vegas Raiders, which is still really weird for me to say. The Los Angeles Chargers, also still kind of tough for me to say. I say San Diego every now and then, it slips up. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Raiders pretty much jumped out, I think, about a week before, or a couple days before Brady made his announcement he was not returning to New England. So it really kind of came down to the Chargers and the Bucs. Now, when you look at the positives and negatives of both teams, very similar, weather-wise, personnel-wise. Coaching, I would kind of give it a little bit more to Tampa Bay with Bruce Arians over Anthony Lynn. No disrespect, I love Anthony Lynn. I think that he is an underrated coach in this league, and I'm really excited to see what he can do with, hopefully, whatever franchise quarterback the Chargers get this year, because they're clearly going to get somebody, whether it's, Justin Herbert or whomever. But then it was announced, I think in the evening, I think around 5 or 6 p.m., that Tom Brady had made it official that he was going to be signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, it was a surprise because Tampa kind of came in the last 2 weeks or so. They weren't talked about right off the bat, but they kind of swooped in at the end, and it was like, okay, they clearly are moving on from Jameis Winston, which is, I think, a smart choice on them. They franchise tag Shaq Barrett, which I really hope they give him a long-term deal because I think he is going to be the next great defensive player. How he didn't make all first NFL team this year was absolutely ridiculous. And I bet he'll go out there and prove it again this year why he's one of the better defensive players in the NFL this year. But they do that, and now And now they have the opportunity, and they were able to work out a deal with Tom Brady that works for both sides. Tom Brady signed a 2-year, $50 million deal. It's fully guaranteed, and he gets about $9 million more in incentives for certain things like getting to the Super Bowl, winning it, leading the league in this. Like there's really specific incentives for Tom Brady. And they also, the Bucs, cannot trade or franchise tag Tom Brady at all. So I think Brady probably is going to be done with his NFL career after these 2 years are up. Unless, obviously, he gets hurt and things are going south. No pun intended since the Bucs are in the NFC South. But the question then becomes, now that we know that Tom Brady is officially going to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, is what type of team is Brady coming into? Well, you have a team that has Mike Evans. You also have Chris Godwin, and you have a relatively decent offensive line. Not one of the better ones, and certainly not as good as the Patriots' offensive line has been the last 10 to 15 years. So it still kind of begs the question as to what are the Bucs going to do in the draft when it comes to building around Tom Brady. And another question, and I don't know if Bucs fans are thinking about this, but are they interested in maybe trying to get a young quarterback to back up Tom Brady and maybe be, the successor to him after these 2 years are up? That's something I was kind of thinking about it and everything. And, one guy that I look at when it comes to helping your offensive line is Williams from the Redskins. I know he wants out. I know that the Redskins are looking to try to move him. Maybe the Bucs, with some of the draft picks that they have, maybe that they can, work out a deal and move Williams to Tampa Bay. And I'm sure Williams wouldn't mind going to Tampa Bay to play with Tom Brady. I did also hear that there are a lot of unnamed free agents that are interested, of course, with going to Tampa Bay and playing with Tom Brady. So obviously, the Bucs are going to be one of the more looked upon teams going into the season because of Tom Brady and because of the expectations that Tampa has and what the NFL expects out of them. So Tampa clearly is going to be a team on the watch this year. And interestingly enough, Tom Brady has 2 things left, I think, in his resume that nobody else has that would really cement his entire legacy. One of them is that he has the opportunity, I don't think this year, but I think possibly next year, meaning his second year of his contract, to play the Patriots, and if he wins, he will have beaten all the teams in the NFL. I think that would be impressive. And also, this year's upcoming Super Bowl is in Tampa. And no team, as we know, has ever played in their own home stadium in the Super Bowl. Maybe Tom Brady could be the first one to do so. I think if he is able to get those, he would firmly cement his legacy as the greatest quarterback in NFL history without a doubt, without any sort of hesitation. And if he's able to not only do that, but to win that Super Bowl, I mean, that just would be an incredible thing. It really would. I would be blown away with that. So, Tom Brady has some high expectations, but you know what? This man been in the league for 20 plus years now. He is built for this, and I'm sure that he knows the expectations. He knows what's expected of him, and I'm sure he's going to try to go out there and do the best that he possibly can. I also heard something kind of interesting today that Tom Brady moved into Derek Jeter's mansion that I guess he is not living in at the time. But I think that's where he's going to end up staying during his time here in Tampa. And also, I think Tom Brady. Another reason that Tom Brady chose Tampa that I think I heard was that it makes it easier for flying wise for Tom Brady to fly back up north to go spend time with his family during the bye week and days off and things like that. So that's good as well. I don't know if Giselle and his children are going to be moving just for now to Tampa or not. It just remains to be seen. I think that they may just stay in Connecticut and just have their kids go to school there. We don't know. That's not my business. I'm not going to go into that any further. But we finally know where Tom Brady's going. We finally know, what we're going to see, who he's going to be with. And, I think Tom Brady being in a Bucs uniform is going to be very interesting, especially because on April 7th, which is next Tuesday, the Bucs are going to be showcasing their new uniforms. I don't know if they're going to go back to the creamsicle style. I don't know if they're going to go back to the ones that they kind of had in the early 2000s when they won the Super Bowl in 02, 03. We shall see. So it'll be really weird. But we also know that Tom Brady is officially going to be wearing number 12. Chris Godwin had it before, and he's willing to give it up, as Godwin will rep number 14. And I saw him post a picture on his Twitter saying, new number, same goals, and I like that. And Chris Godwin said he had a FaceTime call with Tom Brady a couple days ago, and he was just really excited, really excited to just be with this team and go to a place where Tom Brady feels that he is going to be respected and loved the way that he was hoping that Belichick and the Patriots would. But Belichick is stone cold, man. He really is. He is not afraid to, let people go. He's done it in the past. This should not come as that much of a surprise. And the Patriots do have a plan, whether it's with Jared Stidham or waiting another year to maybe draft, Trevor Lawrence, dare I say. I know the NFL world is shaking in their boots about the possibility, but you never know what could happen. Or they go out and get, one of the free agent quarterbacks that we have, whether it's Cam Newton, who got released by Carolina, or Jameis Winston, or Andy Dalton, or whoever. We shall see, especially when week one, gets underway. And again, whenever that is, because we don't know how much longer the quarantine for COVID-19 is going to be. With the stoppages in sports, you kind of have to improvise when it comes to, talking about it and giving content. So we have that. So Tom Brady and TB12 is going to TB, and I still think that the Bucs should, trademark the Brady Bucs, kind of after the Brady Bunch. That was kind of something that came up in my head. But if you guys like that, let me know in the comments, obviously, and we'll try to do something about it. I think that would be kind of a cool little thing for you guys to do to kind of be active with me. So yeah, Tom Brady is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, and he will be for at least the next 2 seasons. So we'll see how that goes. The next move, and I think this was one of the more surprising, if not the most surprising move that I saw so far in free agency. It was a signing, and it was Byron Jones, the cornerback from the Dallas Cowboys. Byron Jones clearly wanted to be paid and become the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. And Byron Jones is a very, very talented corner. He would be a huge addition to whatever team he goes to. There were, teams like, the Cowboys were still interested in trying to bring him back, but I think they're focusing more on trying to get Dak Prescott on a long-term deal. You had the Las Vegas Raiders, you had both the Jets and the Giants, and you had a handful of other teams that weren't specifically, mentioned in reports. But he ended up signing with the Miami Dolphins. Let me repeat that. He signed with the Miami Dolphins, a 5-year, $82.5 million deal. He becomes the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. He gets $57 million guaranteed, and he gets $40 million in the first 2 years, so this season and next. Wow. The Miami Dolphins have clearly made it clear, not using correct English there, but have made it clear that they are now taking that next step in their rebuild. They added other guys like Kyle Van Noy to their defense. They surprised me with the 3-year signing of Eric Flowers, and I don't know how that's going to work, but maybe another new team and hopefully better coaching for him will allow him to finally become the good offensive lineman that the Giants were hoping for when they drafted him several years ago. But the big fish, no pun intended, but the big fish was Byron Jones, and they were able to get him and win that sweepstakes. And that was interesting. And the Dolphins have also been reported that they are trying to see if they can trade for the number 1 overall pick from Cincinnati, because apparently they're very high on Joe Burrow. Now, there's no hesitation that the Dolphins are going to get a franchise quarterback, whether it's Joe Burrow, if they trade up and get the first overall pick, Tua Tagovailoa, who clearly seems, as he reported even just last night, that he is 100% healthy, Justin Herbert, Julian or Jordan Love from Utah State, or, whoever it is. They're clearly going to get a franchise quarterback. Whether or not they play early on, I don't think it's probably going to happen. I think that there's a good chance Ryan Fitzpatrick will be the starting quarterback, at the beginning, and maybe things change depending on how the season goes. But the Dolphins have given their fans a lot to be optimistic about. And with the huge amount of draft picks that they have gotten over some trades that they've made even just last season, it gives them an opportunity to really kind of expedite, in a positive way, their rebuild. And the Dolphins really rallied around Brian Flores towards the end of last season. There were reports that players really loved playing for him, and he was just a player's coach and an emotional guy that really got people pumped up. And they finished the season on a high note by beating Tom Brady and the Patriots in the last game of the season to force the Patriots to play in the wild card round, in which they got knocked out by Tennessee. So the Dolphins gave us one of our favorite, wins of the season. So the Dolphins have a lot to be, positive about, enthusiastic about, and it'll be really interesting to see if they try to move up, if they stay where they are, who they're going to take, especially with a quarterback, and just kind of go from there. But yeah, Byron Jones, that was a really surprising decision. I thought Byron Jones was going to go, possibly to the Raiders, maybe go back to Dallas, who knows. But I think it was clear that Byron Jones was going to take the highest bidder, and it looks like the Dolphins were the highest bidder at $82.5 million. So my hat's off to Miami, as they've just added him and some other really good pieces on the defense. That defense is clearly going to be better than it was last year. They had a lot of rookies playing, especially towards the second half of the season. But now that they have some experience with the talent that they've added, that defense will definitely be a better defense, probably between the 15 and 20 ranks. And that also depends on the draft picks that they make and any other moves that they make prior to the beginning of the season. So that was a surprise, probably the biggest surprise in my opinion. And I'll be interested to see how Byron Jones can contribute to a Dolphins team that is hoping to get back to being a competitive football team in the near future. So the next move I wanted to make here, is we're down to our last 2 moves of the day, was Todd Gurley. Now, Todd Gurley back in 2018 signed a 4-year, $60 million extension with the LA Rams, and 48 of it was going to be guaranteed. Now, you go back to 2 seasons ago when the Rams went to the Super Bowl. Todd Gurley did not have a tremendous year. He was hurt the second half of the year, didn't really contribute in the Super Bowl. And then even this past season, he really, really struggled. And the Rams are what we call in the business are in cap hell. And that means that they really are up against the salary cap and have to try to get creative with how they're able to keep some of their talent. That unfortunately means that they have to get rid of some of their talent. I know that Brandon Cooks is still on the trade block again, by the way. This man cannot stay off the trade block. Not really his fault necessarily, but you know, it's kind of frustrating, I'm sure, for him that he keeps getting, requested in trades, it seems like every single year. But the Rams knew that they were going to have to pay Todd Gurley a lot of money this year. Actually, $20 million plus in salary cap money for this one season. So the Rams decided to swallow the pill and cut him, which gives them now $20.15 million in dead cap. Kind of similar to when the Giants traded Odell. The Giants had a lot of dead cap that they had to swallow for him to play with somebody else. But when Todd Gurley got cut, it didn't come as that much of a surprise. It was a little bit, upsetting. When you give as much money as they did to Jared Goff, or Jared Goof as I like to call him, a guy that clearly has regressed and is clearly not the quarterback that everybody was hoping he was, especially after 2019 when they got exposed by the Patriots. And then this past year they got exposed, and their offense wasn't anything surprising. Defenses were ready for it, and that Jared Goff had a really, really difficult year. And I go back to them getting blown out on Monday Night Football against the Ravens, this past season when Lamar Jackson had 5 or 6 touchdowns. Jared Goff was awful. I mean, he really was. He is just not that good of a quarterback. And the fact that they paid him, so much money to make him one of the higher paid quarterbacks in the NFL, really puts the Rams in a very embarrassing situation. So Stan Kroenke is the owner of the Rams, is certainly not going to be happy with that. But yeah, Todd Gurley, a former, one of the better running backs the last couple of years, who has unfortunately lost a lot of productivity because of injury, went on the market. And I put out a tweet with a poll that said to you guys as to, where do you guys think Todd Gurley is going to go? I thought it was Miami. I thought, with what the Dolphins already did, and knowing that he's not going to make very much money, I think it would be great. It would just give whoever's the franchise quarterback, or even Ryan Fitzpatrick, just another weapon. There were people that said the Atlanta Falcons, because it's from that area, Georgia boy, be great to see him come home. And then there were some other ones I heard, maybe the Steelers, as a backup, maybe, who knows. But didn't take very long for Todd Gurley to find a new team. He signed with the Atlanta Falcons on a 1-year, $6 million prove-it deal. So this is very good. This adds a weapon for Matt Ryan with a Falcons team that's looking to redeem themselves from last year's, really struggling year, in which their defense in particular just could not stay healthy. And hopefully Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and that Falcons offense can get back to, making production like they did a couple years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. They did lose Austin Hooper, who signed a big deal with the Browns, which I think if you're a Falcons fan, you got to be relieved that you didn't end up spending that much money on Hooper, because I don't think he's worth that much amount of money. He's a very good tight end, one of the better ones in the league, but he's not worth the amount of money that the Browns did give him. It just bugs me a little bit that it was that much. But yeah, Todd Gurley, 1 year, $6 million. He gets to play in front of his family and a lot of his friends growing up, and that's great. And maybe it gives him somewhat of a revival. And, the Falcons let go of Devontae Freeman, who's still a free agent at the moment. And they replaced him with Todd Gurley. And I think if Todd Gurley can even get back to playing 75% of what he once was, I think that'll be a huge W for the Falcons, especially with only giving him $6 million this upcoming year. So it's definitely a prove it deal for Todd Gurley. And, he'll try to go out there and have a good season and hopefully get a bigger and possibly better deal from whether it's the Falcons or someone else. But It's a good move for Atlanta. It's a low-risk, high-reward move, in my opinion. And hopefully, for Matt Ryan's sake, they can establish the running game a little bit more so that they can, win some of these closer games without having to throw the football, 40-plus times a game. So, good move by the Falcons. I'm sure Falcons fans are looking forward to seeing it. And if Todd Gurley can stay healthy and perform like he can, the Falcons just got to steal for a year. And that's a really, really good job by the Atlanta Falcons. And now we move to our last move of this episode. And we're going to talk about Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders, for those of you that don't know, he started last season with the Denver Broncos. He was on his last year of his deal. A lot of people were wondering, where was he going to go? Was he going to stay in Denver knowing that they're in a rebuild? Was he going to go, to a playoff contender? Well, he got traded for a first-round pick to the San Francisco 49ers and helped them reach the Super Bowl this past season. And unfortunately, he couldn't help them, win the Super Bowl. But I had pretty good confidence that the 49ers could re-sign him. And trust me, they gave up a bunch, not just the first-round pick. They gave up a bunch for him. So it was one of those things where the Niners were hoping that Sanders could stay. And I think that's one of the reasons why they traded away Deforest Buckner. They were able to get some money back and get a first-round pick back because they obviously lost their first-round pick to Denver. But Emmanuel Sanders, whether or not he was talking with the Niners about making a deal, didn't matter. He ends up signing with the New Orleans Saints on a 2-year, $16 million deal, which could be worth up to $19 million in incentives, depending on certain things that he does. So Drew Brees, who also, by the way, and I should have said this earlier, but also signed a 2-year, a new 2-year deal. So he will be back for another 2 seasons, and he'll get to see Tom Brady twice a year. That'll be fun. And I think the NFC South is going to be a fun division to watch this upcoming year, and hopefully also the year after as well. But Emmanuel Sanders just adds another weapon for Drew Brees. You already have Michael Thomas. You have, Taysom Hill. You have Alvin Kamara. And now you add freaking Emmanuel Sanders. And let me tell you this. You obviously cannot double team both Sanders and Michael Thomas. You just can't do it. So now what? You're going to have to double team one of them, and you're going to leave somebody else one-on-one. And whether it's Michael Thomas or Emmanuel Sanders, you are going to have a tough time no matter which one you decide. So it's going to be very difficult for defenses going up against that Saints team, especially with 8 of their games being played in that Superdome, for them to really slow down on offense. So that offense just got a lot better. They also added some good pieces on defense. They got Malcolm Jenkins. They re-signed DJ Swearinger as well. So this team really now has no excuses. They have to find a way to get through the playoffs and get back to the Super Bowl, because I'm a huge Drew Brees fan. I've really, really enjoyed watching this man play. I'm so lucky and fortunate that I've been able to see him play. One of the greatest quarterbacks in my lifetime. And he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But getting another Super Bowl with the Saints team in the next 2 years I think would fully cement that and really, make it, no hesitation whatsoever for Drew Brees to be in the Hall of Fame. But Drew Brees going to give it at least another 2 more years to try to get back to winning another Super Bowl. And I don't blame him. I really don't. With the talented team that they have. And unfortunately, the Saints had to let go of either Taysom Hill. Well, not necessarily let go, but they had to make a choice between Taysom Hill or Teddy Bridgewater. They couldn't keep both because of the money situation and because Drew Brees decided to come back. So the Saints let Teddy Bridgewater walk, in which he signed a 3+ year deal with the Carolina Panthers. So that'll be interesting to see how, Teddy Bridgewater follows in the shoes of Cam Newton, with now first-year NFL head coach Matt Rule. That'll be another intriguing storyline to check out this upcoming season. But Taysom Hill going to continue to be the impressive Swiss Army knife that he is. And now that you add Emmanuel Sanders, Sean Payton just gets another chess piece to use in his creative ways of making that offense more and more dynamic. So I'll be interested in and excited to see, how Emmanuel Sanders can produce. I know that he's a little bit more up there in age, but he's still a very good wide receiver, and he will do nothing but benefit Drew Brees. I can almost guarantee you that. So that should be fun. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll see how it all goes down. And with that being said, that is going to do it today on this edition of the Mofobo Network YouTube channel. And as always, thank you all very much for tuning in. It really means a lot. I know that some of these could be kind of long, and I know that they're not the world's greatest editing things. I'm trying. I'm really trying to give you guys good content and talk about these different things. So, I really would appreciate your guys' feedback. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're just going to get more and more content, especially with obviously being, in quarantine. I'm going to try to come up with more ideas of topics. Also, make sure to subscribe and check out the Mofobo Network podcast on Anchor.fm. You could also download it and subscribe to it on Google or Spotify or wherever you sell or wherever they distribute podcasts. It's on there. Just look up Mofobo Network like you see here, or type in my first and last name, Neil Villapiano, as well, if that makes it easier on you. But there's a lot coming up. We have a special guest coming up on the latest edition of the Mofobo Network podcast, and that will come out at about 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, April 3rd. And you'll have to wait and see who that special guest is, or you can also check it out on my social medias. And speaking of social media, please also follow me on Twitter at THENVPSHOW. Follow me on Instagram at N as in Neil, V as in Victor, P as in, the musical instrument piano, QB, like the position, 11. That is my Instagram. Also, make sure to check out and follow and, whatever you want to do with the Mofobo Network, Facebook page as well. It's where I make all my posts and I let you guys know when new videos and new podcast episodes are up and everything like that. So make sure you check that out as well. And, I promise you guys that the content will just slowly but surely get better and better as we move forward with this. And I really hope that you guys stick around and join me on this journey, because this is going to be a lot of fun. So thank you all very much for tuning in today. And as always, no matter what's going on in the world, no matter what is going on, whether you're having good days or bad days, just remember when you wake up in the morning to always kick Mofobo. So thank you all very much, and I will see you guys very soon. I'm Neil Villapiano. Have a great day.